Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Saeed Atcha is the founding chief executive of Youth Leads UK, a charity he established aged 15 that has supported more than 7,000 disadvantaged young people access volunteering opportunities and skills development programmes. He was made recipient of an MBE in Her Majesty the Queen's New Year's Honours List in 2019, the youngest recipient that year. He also serves as the youngest ever Deputy Lieutenant of Greater Manchester. Growing up in local authority care in Bolton, Saeed has extensive lived experience of the care sector and the disadvantages that young people face. So what does it take to set up a charity at just 15 years of age? Without further ado, let's get into it. Saeed Atcha, good morning. Welcome to the Extrology podcast. It's great to have you as my guest. I really appreciate your time. And I'd love to start, if I may, with what I consider it's a fascinating story, Youth Leads UK, how someone even contemplates or gets to a point in time whereby considering starting a charity at 15 is phenomenal in my book. I look at what I was doing as a 15-year-old kid and something of that magnitude wasn't even on my radar. Huge respect for that. So what is it that inspires a 15-year-old to start a charity?
Thank you. Gosh, well, a few things. Now I've had the benefit of hindsight. I'm now 25. So when I think 10 or 11 years ago, what was it that got me to set up Youth Leads UK? I had quite a difficult upbringing, and I was in care of the local authority for a large part of my life, foster care, kinship care, residential care, all the different types of care at different points throughout my childhood. But one thing that really frustrated me throughout all of that time was how I would always have decisions made for me that were due to impact me without me having a say. And that was something that I had a frustration for a number of years. But there were two things on one day in particular that really pushed me to that point where I decided that setting up Youth Leads was what I was going to do. So the first was the morning before school. I went to the local shop to buy all the junk food that the school subsequently banned for very good reason. I used to buy 3 energy drinks and 2 bars of chocolate every day. That probably explains why I was always on the senior leadership team corridor at break and lunchtime. But I went to the shop and I saw all the newspapers to my left, the newspaper stand, and the headlines that morning describing young people as feral animals, as yobs, as scum, as evil, as threatening. All of those real headlines describing a whole swathe of our population. And this was 2011. It was the time of the riots in London, Manchester, Salford and Birmingham. But I was also that stereotype. I was that young person on the peripheries of criminal justice teams, and I never wanted to be that young person. So I saw those headlines and it really struck a chord with me. And I decided when I saw them that I wanted to do something about it. I had no idea what at that point, but I knew I wanted to do something. And later that morning, a teacher pulled me out of a lesson to say, Saeed, it's GCSE time now. You really need to focus on those exams. And one of the things I was doing, so when you're naughty at school, they try and give you some responsibilities. And one of the responsibilities they gave me, because they knew about my passion for writing, I was doing the school magazine. And they asked me to stop doing the school magazine in order to put more effort into my exams and get the grades that I need for the next step. But I was never in school for grades. School was the only stable thing in my life, away from the chaos of my home life. And to be told that the thing that I enjoy doing, the thing that is keeping me in school in the first place, was going to be taken away, I got really angry. And that then married up with the negative press that I saw in the morning. And I decided that I wanted to be part of the press and publish positive news stories about young people. So I told the teacher in no uncertain terms to disappear. And I'm going to set up a magazine that's bigger than this whole school and bigger than this town and all the rest of it. And later that day, I wrote to the chief executive of O2, saying, here's my idea. You're a youth brand. Do you want to back it? Do you want to support it? And a few weeks later, we were successful in securing a couple of £100 from O2 as a tester. And that was one of the very first times that I felt truly believed in. That not only was I being given responsibility and some cash to get my idea off the ground. I mean, we very quickly spent that 300 quid. It was a really expensive meeting. We ordered a load of pizza and bought some coffees and bought some stationery, but we had a very clear plan at the end of that meeting. And so we went back to O2 and said, we've spent up, but we have a really, really good plan for the next 2 years. To which the response was, well, we knew that was going to happen because it's not an awful lot of money to get something like that off the ground. Here's £2,500 and here's somebody senior to mentor you. And when I read that email, fell over because I actually felt like, wow, someone believes that I can make a difference.
And that's interesting. I don't want to define it as initially fueled perhaps by anger. Do you remember the range of emotions that take you from, that lad in the sweet shop and the newsagents, whatever, being felt almost wronged by what you were, or I would imagine, what were the emotions? What were you feeling at that point? How do you go from, I think we probably all could, circumstances in our lives where we felt wronged or annoyed by something, that seems a little disingenuous, but something that had frustrated us. But that's a long leap from angry and feeling that I don't need to be defined by that headline to actually doing something about it. That's an enormous leap. And I don't know what the statistics are, but I would imagine you'd be in the less than 1% of those that do something about how they're feeling to that degree. But do you remember the range of emotions?
The first emotion really was anger and disbelief. Then I was intrigued as to how newspapers can print things like that. Because as a 15-year-old, I didn't really read newspapers. It was just what I saw the front pages in the shop. But I'd never seen such strong language on the front pages of newspapers before that, or at least not that I could remember. So it was a sense of, can this happen? And it was just that anger and fury, then that disbelief. And then when I went to school, to be then told you can't do the school magazine, that was, again, disbelief, anger, and I just wanted to get out of that situation.
So you've got your £2,500.
Yeah.
And some mentorship, is that right, from O2?
Yes.
But then how do you decide, respectfully, but as a 15-year-old, what you're going to do with that £2,500 that isn't going to be, energy drinks and chocolate bars, but actually, to your point, you've clearly made the decision to do something meaningful, purposeful. Yeah. How do you make that decision? Where do you go from that £2,500 to a charity?
So what we did with that first bit of cash was we were asked to go and get quotes, go and contact people for printing this magazine, for designing this magazine. Find out how much things would cost, and then find out how many you can print with it. Where do you want to send the magazine? Then there was the question of, well, it's a magazine. You can make some money off this because you can charge people to advertise. And we said, no, we don't want that. We don't want people advertising, because that's what stops us from reading magazines, because they're just full of adverts. Then we had the whole question of online. Why don't you just do online? And we said, we don't feel like we should do it online. And one of the things we were taught through the mentorship is that you have to make evidence-based decisions. So where's the evidence to say that you don't want to do it online? So we did a survey with about 3,000 young people in Bolton and asked them, do you want it online or do you want it in print? And overwhelmingly, it was in print. We want it A5. We don't want it A4 because that's too big to fit in our bag. We want it A5, and we want it in print because actually we don't want to spend all of our time in front of the screen. And that rings true today because we still print the magazine today. And it would save us a hell of a lot of money if we didn't. But I was always wanting to make sure, and our tagline right at the start for the charity was by young people, for young people. And that rings true today. We still are informed, all of our decisions are informed by the people that we are there to serve. So how did we go from that initial magazine to a charity? It was a conversation that I had with my friends. So when I knew that the cash was coming and the support was there, I got a group of friends together, and these were all friends who were either long-time friends or working with me already on that school magazine. And we very quickly realised the skills that we were all developing, organisational, the financial skills, the planning, all skills that we didn't realise that we didn't have or we didn't need. And so we felt there was an untapped market for young people's views and opinions, and also for young people to have a say in society, but facilitated by other young people. So 2 years in, we'd printed 2 editions of the magazine. We decided that we wanted to take this further. We wanted this to be a more permanent fixture in supporting young people in Greater Manchester. And we were college age at this time. We were all in college as well. And that's when we decided we're going to register this as a charity. We want to formalise it, and we want to help many more young people. And that's when we first started thinking about organisational strategies and things that we never knew organisations had, business plans and all the rest of it. And our sole aim was to give young people a voice that is not only heard, but acted upon. And it has to be by young people and for young people.
Was there a point at which, a trigger, if you like, a moment where you thought, actually, this is something more than perhaps what I initially had perceived?
It was almost immediately, because we just wanted as many young people involved in this magazine as possible. And we would stand in the supermarket and stand in the town centre with T-shirts that said Explode Magazine on, in order to encourage young people to get involved. We had a street crew, which were us, me and my friends, in the town centre, in the local cinema, in places that young people go to. And when we had, and this was very quick, this only took about 12 months, but when we had parents of young people that we didn't know who were involved in the magazine come up to us and thank us for what we did and say, my son has just grown massively in confidence. You see, when that magazine came through the front door and you saw his name next to his article, that was just fantastic. He wants to be a journalist. And then another young person's parents who came and said, we've taken the magazine to the local newspaper and they've given work experience to my daughter. And it was those two, very, very early on, those two things that made me decide this can't be a one-time thing. This can't be a short project. This is something that is helping young people develop their skills and develop their potential. And so that's why the decision was made to actually formalise this into a charity. I and my friends had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, where we were going to go with it, whether we would continue ourselves with it, given our own careers and all the rest of it. But yeah, what a journey.
And why a charity? Why not, for example, to your point, you alluded to this earlier, those early days, perhaps that someone saying to you, hey, this is a magazine, you can charge people for advertising, you've covered that off. But what was the sort of the thinking behind, much as I applaud you, but I'm interested in the thought process behind it. Why a charity, not for example, a limited company, a profit-making entity in that respect?
We always wanted to be non-profit. We always wanted to be an organisation that is for good and not to profit from our activities. I think we also took some advice, and the advice was there's much more longevity in a charity because you don't own it. You're not connected to it in that way. They said, Saeed, when you leave, it will still be governed by an independent board of trustees and it will continue. And that, I think, was what we liked. That you take us away in a few years and the organisation will still carry on with independent leadership and independent thought. And we liked the fact that we had to have trustees who would help and support. And then when I Googled trustee and looked at trustee boards, I thought, we don't want that. We don't want, a group of retired professionals because we're a youth organisation. And I remember writing to the Charity Commission at the time saying, well, we're a group of young people, all of us under the age of 18. What can we do? We can't set up a charity because we have to be 18. And they said, not necessarily. One young person has to be 18 and then you can have trustees 16 plus, as long as one on the board is 18. So we asked our mentor to serve as a trustee for a couple of years and able to help us set up the bank account and all of those things. And then we'll kick them off when we're all of an age that we are trusted to be stewards of an organisation. But yeah, it was just that longevity. It was just it was also the access to grant funding, because when we looked at other ways to fund what we were doing, it was always must be a registered charity or must be a CIC or something like that. And I think CICs were fairly new then. I'm not sure of the different legal structures back then, but we were just advised that it's fairly new. We just don't know enough about that, so just go for being a charity.
And at what point did you think this is a career choice, as opposed to, I don't wish to downplay, but to your point earlier around not quite a school project, but actually it's clearly evolved way beyond. But was there a point at which you thought, actually, I'm making a career from this now?
I think it was probably then in 2015. So we were established in 2011. In 2015, after we'd registered as a charity, we started to get noticed a little bit more, noticed by national organisations and noticed by different bodies. And I was nominated to be an I Will ambassador. Now, I Will is a campaign that was set up by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, with all three party leaders at the time, none of which are in politics anymore. And I was nominated to be an ambassador and was successful in becoming an ambassador. And that gave us quite an interesting national viewpoint and perspective and an audience. And people were thinking and questioning, how have you done this? How at your age have you done this? And I remember the very first thing I did as an ambassador was at the O2 Arena with the chief exec of O2 on stage talking about what I'd done. And he was quizzing me into, what did you do with the cash? How useful did you find the mentorship? Tell us about the magazine, all of that stuff. And from then, it just started to grow. In 2016, we then became the youngest ever organisation to receive Her Majesty the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service, because we were 100% volunteer-led. And people started to bill us as this youth voice agency. People would ask us how we encourage more young people to engage with what we do. And we were seen as a success story of youth social action. And after receiving the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service in 2016, that helped us secure some funding. And I was chair of trustees right from the start. And I said to the trustees, we need a paid post in this organisation. We've been volunteer-led for 6 years. We need somebody paid. And our first position was our charity support executive, whose role it was to coordinate the volunteers, coordinate the production of the magazine and all the rest of it. And that was just fantastic to have, somebody who we knew was working on behalf of the organisation, and they were paid to do that. And we gave a young person a paid job, and that was just a huge, huge milestone. And then there was a funder who said to us, well, you haven't got a chief exec. I said, well, that's me. And they said, no, but you're the chair of the organisation. I said, yeah, because we can't afford to pay me. I'm working in radio. I'm still studying. I've got my job. I'm just doing this because I absolutely love it. And I set it up. To which they said, well, you need to think about applying for funding for the chief exec position, because you can really take this somewhere. And so we did. We did think about it. We applied for funding, and then I became the second paid member of staff in 2017. So I actually had to come off the board, because you can't be paid as a trustee, and became the chief executive of the organisation. And since then, just having that capacity, and there's now 6 others working for the organisation as well, with a huge majority of them as youth engagement officers. It's just a fantastic position that we're in now, from where we grew it from. But, I became that second paid employee of the organisation, and that then, I think, was the moment that it became a bit more real that this was a career which now I've done for 5 years, well, nearly 5 years. And, I've absolutely loved it, because the impact that I've been able to make, well, I'm just incredibly thankful, because I was then appointed an MBE in Her Majesty the Queen's New Year's Honours List in 2019, again becoming the youngest person on that list. Later that year, I was appointed Deputy Lieutenant of Greater Manchester, the youngest person ever since the inception of the role, I think, in the 1800s. And a lot of organisations and people still come to us every day saying, how do we engage more young people? How do we get more young people involved? How do we encourage more youth voice? And now the organisation is a little bit different to what we were when we first set up. We were just the magazine when we first set up. Now we are much more about systemic changes within decision-making bodies that actually give young people the right space and the right support to have their voices heard and acted upon. So 3 examples. Young people and school governors. There's not enough young people who are school governors. School governors are nowhere near representative of school populations as they should be. Second, trustees. Again, it's something like less than 3% of charity trustees are between the ages of 16 and 30. So that there needs to be a lot more in that space. But also, one thing that I'm really trying and pushing and convening decision makers on at the moment, ready for some expansion next year, is magistrates, an area that I think is relatively untouched, but it's less than 0.1% of magistrates under the age of 30. Less than 0.1. Not even 1, 0.1. And I just think these are people who are making decisions about whether or not to fine somebody for not paying, for example, their TV licence, when you have a choice between gas, electric, food and a TV license, I think it's fairly obvious. But if, for example, you haven't been through that yourself, and I have, because I remember having to run down to the shop to put money on the electric card to run back up to put it on the meter, I just think sometimes wrong decisions can be made if you haven't got that life experience. Young people are 25% of our population here in the United Kingdom, but making up less than 0.1%. All I'm asking for is just a little bit more equality on that front.
And talk to us about some of the initiatives through which you engage with young people. What are the sorts of things that you will do that allow you access to the audience that you have?
So the magazine, again, is one of the biggest ways we do that. So we have a leadership program. So in 2019, I took the decision to rebrand the organisation and reposition the organisation, because we had started to do an awful lot more than just the magazine. But the name of the organisation was Explode Magazine. In 2019, I remember I was on holiday. It was 4 a.m. at the time when I made this decision. I was walking along the beach at 4 a.m., as you do, and it just came to me what I wanted the organisation to be rebranded to, and it was Youth Leads. And I took that back to the board and I said, look, it's Youth Leads because we believe in a country where youth leads. You drop the TH in youth and it becomes you lead. And we can be a bit creative in our branding to make it look like that. So we've got a clear message to young people and to wider society. And then it shows that we're not just a magazine anymore. So along with that, we had a whole strategic refresh. And there's 3 areas that we work on: skills enrichment, self-empowering potential, and influencing change. Those 3 examples about trusteeship, governors, and all the rest of it is the influencing change part. The skills enrichment is the magazine, and the self-empowering potential is young people leading social action projects. So our leadership programme aims to cover all 3 of those. And young people join us for 3 months at a time, and we run it 4 times a year. And as part of it, they get employability support. They get skills enrichment training in communication skills, in digital, in design, in photography, in all skills that they need in a modern world. Skills that young people tell us that they don't get in school but want. And then they are also tasked with coming up with a social action project. So the most recent one was that our young people came to us and said that they were really fed up with the level of period poverty in the United Kingdom, and they wanted to do something about it. And this was quite interesting because the demographic of the young people that we work with, not purposefully, but our majority Black, Asian and minority ethnic young people. And interestingly, one of the young guys said to me, I can't go home and tell my parents that I'm working on a project to do with period poverty. And I said, I understand, because it's very much often a taboo subject, and particularly in Asian households, and I can only vouch for this from personal experience, it's not really something you talk about. And I said to him, well, in a few weeks' time, you're going to learn about persuasion skills. And I want you to just try and have that conversation with your parents about what you're going to do and why it's important and why you want to do it. So because if you start to win over them with the why you're doing it and why it needs to happen, it might be a more fruitful conversation. And he said, no, I don't quite think so. I said, I tell you what, I'll send a letter explaining this is a project that we're working on. It's great to have Abdul, his name was, and he won't mind me saying, great to have you on board. And then after that session, he went and had the conversation, and now they talk freely as a family about it with his sisters and all the rest of it because they understand the importance of why we need to. And I just thought, wow, that is fantastic. But the actual project was trying to get rid of some of that taboo. It was also to try and understand why only a quarter of schools eligible signed up for the free products that government is supplying. Because government have a commitment to give every school and college, any education place that needs these products, to order them for free. That's relatively new. And our young people were concerned as to why there's still some schools who hadn't signed up. Was it just a case of they didn't know, or, what is it? So they did some digging, they did some research and found it was a mixture of schools not knowing about the programme, schools just saying, well, we don't need the government support, we're already doing it, we're fine. Some schools saying, well, we don't need it, there's not really an issue here. To which our young people went back and said, well, have you asked your pupils that? How do you know you don't need those products? But then also, they did some research to find out why young people weren't accessing the products that were there in the schools. And then they took that research to the Minister for Women and Equalities and said that young people aren't accessing it because they've got to put their hands up in the middle of a lesson, which is not a very comfortable thing to do. It's not just given to them. It's often on a senior leadership team corridor. They've got to answer far too many questions before they're even able to access it, and a few other things. So the recommendation was that the government says to schools, you just give a box every month to every young person who experiences a period. You just give it to them, it becomes standard practice, and that's that done. You don't need any of this. It is all done and it is all sorted. And that's now started to come through in a large number of schools. So that's the journey of the skills enrichment that they were developing, the persuasion skills, the organisation, all the rest of it, through to the self-empowering potential, because they were leading this project. They were when the media got in touch and we were asked to give quotes and things on behalf of the organisation, I've always said that should not be me. That should be the young people, and we'll support them through it. So ITV interviewed our young people and put a great piece together for the 6 o'clock news. Again, that's the self-empowering potential. And then the influencing change. Rather than being frustrated and angry at something, use it. Use that energy you have to try and change it and try and at least influence the change if you can't make the change yourself. So that's the kind of journey I try and put our young people through every 3 months. And that's where we are today as an organisation. I think a tiny bit more grown up, not fully, because we should never be fully grown up. And I myself have given myself a bit of a time limit. I am 25 now. I think I'll probably do another 12 or so months and then I'll disappear from the organisation because for a number of reasons. I don't want founder syndrome to kick in. I don't want to start to be that person in meetings to say, well, that wasn't quite my vision, or, I didn't really envisage us going this way. The truth is, all throughout my leadership of the organisation, I didn't envisage us getting this far anyway. As you say, this was just a school project to start with. There were never any plans beyond printing that first magazine. And we have just made plans at each milestone.
It's an incredibly inspiring story. Looking back from the lessons you've learned, the experiences that you've acquired, is there anything perhaps that you, with the benefit of hindsight, would have done differently?
No, definitely not, because I think the spontaneity in which we did things, the passion, we always knew it came from a place of good. I don't think we've ever had to make hugely difficult decisions. I don't think would have done anything differently. Definitely not the kind of earliest days. Definitely not, because that's how you learn, that's how you experience. And would I set up another organisation? I'm not sure I've got it in me to do that again, because this has been a tough 10 years.
What have you learned from the experience, do you think?
Patience. I have learned an awful lot of patience. The charity sector does not move quickly. The world of funding is sometimes horrendously complicated and can hamper creativity. I've never understood why funders don't fund what's called core costs. They're reluctant to pay for your office or your staff team. They'd rather pay for a project and things like that. And I've never quite understood that, because you can't have that without the central function of an office. There's been a lot of things that I've just, again, questioned, why does it work like this? But I've always been honest with the people, who funders, for example, and regulators. I've always been very, very honest as to say, well, why? People skills, most definitely. One thing I've learned is to be measured in my response to things, and to be thoughtful and rational. So I'm always quite reluctant to be the first to offer a quote on things or the first to comment on things, because I think there's benefit in taking stock and thinking, and not just being, not just saying the first thing that comes to mind, which is why sometimes I have to remove the Twitter app from my phone, because it's as tempting as it can be. I just have to think, no, I have a 5-second rule. I'll draft a tweet and then I have to look at it for 5 seconds before I tweet it. And if I'm not feeling as angry or energized, I'll say, then I won't send it. But I'm also one that doesn't delete things. I don't delete tweets. If I've said something, I've said it, and that's me. If I have to apologise, it will stay there, and I will apologise for it. But I don't think you should delete things, because once it's out there, it's out there.
You've a number of trusteeships yourself, as I understand it. What do you think you've gained or learned from that experience?
What have I learned and gained from the experience of trusteeships? And I have spent some time with some incredibly inspiring individuals. I've spent time with people that I never, ever, ever thought that I'd be in the same room as. Particularly when I was a trustee of Step Up to Serve, which was behind the I Will campaign. The trustees on that board ranged from the chief exec of the Scouts to former commander-in-chief of the armed forces in the UK, somebody who's worked for the Prince of Wales for a really long time and has such an infectiously positive attitude on young people making a difference. I've got to say, I think that for me was one of the most forming roles that I have had as a trustee, because I was able to see how a relatively small, nimble, flexible organisation with about 12 staff was able to create national change with this group of people around it, and the governance was so strong. I learned a lot about how to speak to people, how to chair meetings, how to channel my positive energy, how to work with others, how to be persuasive, because that was the role that got me into a lot of the rooms with people who I never really thought I'd ever be in rooms with. And I then was hosting for the Prince of Wales at St James's Palace the Step Up to Serve Advisory Council meeting. So I was stood up in front of chief execs of FTSE 100s, chief execs of major statutory bodies, ministers, the next king, and I was hosting that meeting. And if that's not youth leadership, I don't know what is. But the level of support that was around me to get me to that point, I'll never forget. Knowing how to have conversations, knowing how to present yourself and how things work and how not to be irrational. Yeah, those are I think the biggest things for me that I've learned.
So what drives you, Saeed? You've achieved an enormous amount in a respectfully relatively short period of time. What is it that drives you?
Passion for change. My passion for change drives me. My want for more equity for young people drives me. I became Social Mobility Commissioner in 2018 for 3 years, and I've just finished that role. That role was quite an interesting role because that is where I was exposed to all of the data. I was exposed to just how bad life can be for people, just how difficult moving up in life can be. I think that role and the data and the reports and the research and everything with it and the way the government works will drive me for many years to come to try and achieve that equity for young people.
So what does success look like for you?
Gosh, success for me it's really difficult because I got married last year, nearly 2 years ago, sorry. Gosh, already. And before I got married, I'll say success for me is making a difference in the world. Success for me is working flat out to change things. But now I have to think about others that are more immediate to me. And given the pandemic, I've become a lot closer to members in my family. I think success for me is not giving up. Success for me is being happy with the bit that you're able to do. And success for me is bringing others along with you on the journey. So, for example, we now have the pandemic showing itself quite forcefully again. And I had planned over Christmas and New Year to do some catch-up work. But instead, I'm going to be volunteering at vaccination sites to support the effort. And I'm taking my wife with me. I'm encouraging my mum to do it. I'm taking my 15-year-old sister to do it as well. So I think success for me is encouraging others to see why you do what you do and bringing them on the journey with you. Because as Her Majesty the Queen says, thousands of small acts can create big change. And that's what I'm trying to achieve now.
You mentioned some of those figures that you've met along the way that you'd found to have been inspiring. But I guess who do you admire? Who do you look up to?
Oh, bizarrely, the first person that popped into my head there was Daniel Craig, because I've been watching. It's this time of year, isn't it? Bond is always on the telly. I've no idea why. Maybe it's the suits and the cars. But no, it's difficult because I could just give you such a long list. You know, I admire former President Obama. I admire Sir Richard Branson. I admire His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Sussex. I admire those who do good and use their positions to do good, but not just do good. You see, it's encouraging others to be with you on the journey. And President Obama does that through the Obama Foundation. The Duke of Sussex and Cambridge do that through the Diana Award. They do it through supporting charities that, for example, Sir Richard Branson supports as well. So I just think anybody who does good, I admire. And, you know, I may not be connected to any of them, but, you know, go them and you know, keep encouraging others to do the same.
You mentioned that in terms of what the future might look like for you, perhaps another 12 months with youth leads and then maybe time for a change.
Yeah.
What does the future look like for Saeed Atcha?
I really don't know is my completely honest answer. I have got so many things to think about. I don't know if I actually do something that I studied for. I've got a master's in PR. Do I go down the PR route? Do I do another government appointment? Do I set up another charity or go and become chief executive at an organisation? I really want to go into the private sector for a little bit. I want to help businesses engage with young people, particularly on the equity side. I want to support businesses to get more young people from socioeconomic backgrounds through their doors. Do I become a consultant? I have no idea. There are many options, and I think that's what's making it really challenging for me, because there's too many options. There's too many things that I could do. Yeah, I don't know.
So looking back, if ordinarily a question I might seek to ask is perhaps, you know, And I think in your case, it's relevant. If you go back to that 15-year-old in the newsagents angered by headlines that he saw on the newspaper, what advice might you give to that young man looking back?
Believe in yourself, because you can do it. To coin a phrase from Nike, just do it. Don't keep thinking about trying to do, just do it. And whatever that is, whether it is writing to the top or sending an email or having a conversation, just do it. That's what I think. But believe that you can, and you will.
And I guess that therefore implies, again, similar question, but what advice you might give to any aspiring young person with a dream that would resonate? Yeah,
just do it. Just get out there. Just, I didn't have the best upbringing. I didn't have things that some people may take for granted, but that didn't stop me. I'm not saying there aren't systemic barriers in the way, because yes, of course there are, but just do it. Whatever the it is, that might be the small step to the bigger thing, but just do it.
Saeed Atcha, that's been fascinating. I've already used the phrase inspiring once, but absolutely is the phrase that springs to mind. It's a wonderful story.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's an awful lot more to come, and I know that Extrology listeners will be fascinated to see where it might take you. I wish you well in all your future endeavours. Really appreciate your time and insight this morning. It's been great to speak with you, and I wish you all the very best for the future, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Lee. I've enjoyed our conversation, and I enjoy listening to the podcast and getting some inspiration from others as well.
Fantastic. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of it.
Thank you. You too.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.